All right, so this deep dive is going to take us into, well, one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American history, the Zodiac Killer, right? And you guys have given us a ton to dig through here. We've got FBI files, a timeline from history.com, even some Wikipedia. So really get down to the bottom of what we know for sure about this case. So late 1960s, Northern California, a killer is terrorizing the public A&D, playing these mind games with these cryptic messages and ciphers, and even decades later, this case
That's
it just grabs you.
It's so fascinating to think about how this case just preyed on everyone's fear of the unknown. He wasn't just a killer; he was like a puzzle master, like this phantom, like taunting the authorities, taunting the public. So it's no wonder that it still, grips our imaginations all these years later.
Right, and to lay some groundwork here, 5 confirmed murders, 2 attempted murders. Each one, well, I mean, they're all unsettling, but it seems like it just kept escalating. So what can you tell us about these attacks and what made them so terrifying?
Well, let's start with that first attack in December of 1968, Lake Herman Road. David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, a teenage couple on a first date. I mean, can you just imagine the scene? This secluded lover's lane, shots ring out, the killer just vanishes. And what's really chilling is that the first shots actually missed, which just, I think, really amplified the terror for those young victims.
That's heartbreaking, and it really sets the stage for this like escalating fear that I'm sure just gripped the entire region, right? Because it's not even just the violence, it's the randomness, it's the sense that anyone could be a target.
Yeah, exactly. And then in July of 1969, we have the Blue Rock Springs attack. Darlene Ferrin and Michael McGough. They were shot in their car. Darlene, tragically, she didn't survive, but Michael did. And he actually provided some really crucial eyewitness testimony. And in this case, the killer was even bolder. He circled back to their car before attack, almost like he was, savoring the anticipation.
Oh, that's just, I mean, that detail, it's bone chilling. It really adds a whole other layer of just like disturbing calculation to his actions. And what's interesting is that, unlike a lot of serial killers who target a specific type of victim, the Zodiac seemed to choose his victims almost at random.
Yeah, that's a really important observation. And, that randomness just fueled that widespread fear.
Right.
Because no one could predict who would be next. And then the case takes yet another turn. With the Lake Berryessa attack in September of 1969, now it's Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard who are brutally stabbed.
Yeah.
So not only has he switched weapons, now he's wearing this, infamous hooded costume with that Zodiac symbol on it. And of course, he leaves that message on the car door claiming responsibility.
Well, right. The hooded costume, the symbol, it's just so deliberate, almost theatrical. Like he's creating this, this terrifying persona.
Totally. And then that theatricality just becomes even more pronounced in the final confirmed murder. Paul Stein, a cab driver who was shot in San Francisco's Presidio Heights neighborhood in October of 1969. And what's really frustrating about this case is how close the police actually came to catching him. There was a mix-up in the description. And it led them to search for a black suspect, when the Zodiac was actually a white man. And he just slipped away. He even sent a piece of Stein's shirt to the San Francisco Chronicle. It's like this gruesome trophy to taunt the authorities.
Wow, that's just, I mean, that almost feels like a direct challenge, way of showing just how easily he could outsmart them. I can't imagine the fear that must have gripped San Francisco after.
Oh, absolutely. It just sent shockwaves through the city. And it just underscored just how bold the Zodiac was. I mean, he was willing to operate even in this very densely populated area.
Right. Yeah, it's like he wanted to become this, this legend, but in the most twisted way imaginable, right? And it's clear that he knew how to use the media to his advantage. But let's shift gears a little bit here. Let's go from, the physical attacks to the psychological warfare, right? Those chilling communications that he was sending out, letters, ciphers, even greeting cards. It's like he had this whole arsenal of ways to just keep the public and the police on edge.
Yeah, and they weren't just about, sowing fear. They were really carefully crafted to try to manipulate and control the whole narrative, He understood the power of the media, and he was using it brilliantly to just amplify his whole impact.
Right. So let's break down those communications a little bit. So we got letters, we got ciphers. I mean, where do we even start with this?
Well, I think a good place to start is with the letters. Often they're very boastful. They're riddled with misspellings and almost always start with that phrase, "This is the Zodiac speaking." And he used these letters to claim responsibility, to taunt the police, even make demands. I mean, can you imagine being a newspaper editor back then?
Yeah.
Receiving one of these letters knowing that you're holding this piece of this terrifying puzzle?
Oh, I can't even imagine like the pressure that those editors must felt, knowing that publishing those letters could either like help catch the killer or just further feed his ego, right?
Look.
And those ciphers, man, it was like his signature move, right? Like he was challenging the whole world to try to decode these secrets. And one of the most famous, the 408 symbol cipher, it was actually cracked by a school teacher, a couple.
Yeah.
What did it reveal?
Yeah.
And did it offer any like concrete clues to his identity?
Well, it's amazing, right? A couple in their spare time were the ones who unlocked this puzzle. But unfortunately, the cipher itself, it didn't directly reveal his identity, but it did offer, this disturbing glimpse into like his psyche. He talked about needing slaves in the afterlife. It's almost like he was building this twisted mythology around himself. There's an interesting detail that's often overlooked, though. In that 408 cipher, he mentioned this specific police officer that he really hated and claimed that he was collecting quote-unquote slaves to use against this officer in the afterlife. But here's the thing. This specific officer had actually left the force months before the cipher was even sent.
Oh, wow.
So this detail suggests that the Zodiac was either relying on, outdated information or was deliberately trying to mislead investigators.
That's a really interesting point, It adds another layer of complexity to his whole motives, right? I mean, was he trying to be helpful or was this just like another mind game?
I think that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's one that continues to baffle researchers to this day. I mean, it's this blend of seemingly genuine information, but mixed with this, potential misdirection. And it makes those communications so difficult to interpret.
Right. So we got these cryptic letters, these elaborate ciphers, but he didn't stop there, right? Tell us about some of the other ways that he tried to communicate.
Well, he also used greeting cards, but not for well wishes. He sent a Halloween card with a bomb threat. Another one was sent directly to a journalist. It's like he was trying to just maintain this constant air of menace, just keep reminding everybody that he was still out there watching.
Right, that constant need for attention, that desire to keep himself at the forefront of everyone's minds. It's almost as if the fear he generated was just as important as the actual crimes themselves.
Yeah, that's a really astute observation. And, it's really this psychological aspect of this case that's perhaps the most unsettling. He clearly understood the power of fear, and he used it masterfully.
Okay, so we've got this pattern of, calculated attacks and chilling communications. But the big question remains, right? Who was the Zodiac Killer? So let's dive into some of the suspects and the various leads that investigators have pursued over the years. I mean, where do we even begin?
Well, there were a number of suspects investigated, but one name really stands out, Arthur Lee Allen. He was actually the only suspect officially named by police. And for good reason. He was a former teacher, a convicted sex offender. And it really did seem like he fit certain aspects of the profile. But ultimately, the evidence was just inconclusive.
So why did Allen become such a strong suspect, and what ultimately led investigators to rule him out?
Well, I mean, Allen was investigated extensively, and there were some, really tantalizing pieces of circumstantial evidence. I mean, he owned this watch with the Zodiac symbol on it. He had a connection to one of the victims, and he even, spoke about wanting to kill people and call himself Zodiac. But when it came to the hard evidence, things just didn't quite add up.
Seems like that classic case of close, but no cigar. What specifically didn't match up?
Well, handwriting analysis was inconclusive. They compared his writing to the Zodiac's letters, and they found some similarities, but not enough for a definitive match. Then there was the fingerprint evidence, or lack thereof, rather. They had several partial prints from the Zodiac's letters, but none of them matched Allen's. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, DNA testing, which of course wasn't available at the time of the original investigation, was later conducted, and it didn't link him to the crimes.
So despite all the suspicions surrounding him, the forensic evidence just couldn't solidify the case. That must have been so frustrating for those investigators. What about any other suspects?
Well, over the years, countless individuals have been scrutinized. Some based on, flimsy evidence, others on, slightly more compelling leads. A man who bore resemblance to police sketches, another who wrote a book with themes eerily similar to the Zodiac's letters. I mean, the list goes on and on. But none have ever been definitively linked to the crimes.
Right. It's almost as if the Zodiac was deliberately trying to muddy the waters, throwing out these red herrings to keep investigators off his trail.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility.
Right.
I mean, his understanding of police procedures and his apparent ability to manipulate the media all suggest this level of sophistication that made him incredibly difficult to catch.
Yeah, and this brings us to another really intriguing aspect of this whole case. The unsolved mysteries, the loose ends that just, keep fueling all this speculation. And the case of Donna Lass really stands out. Can you tell us about her story and why some people believe that she might be another Zodiac victim?
Sure, Donna Lass was a nurse in Lake Tahoe, and she vanished without a trace in 1970. Now, her disappearance was never officially linked to the Zodiac, but it does share some unsettling similarities with his known modus operandi. For example, there was this postcard, potentially sent by the Zodiac, that depicted this scene that some believe refers to the area where Donna was last seen. And years later, a skull was found and identified as hers. And this discovery really just added fuel to the fire. For those who believe that the Zodiac's reign of terror extended beyond those officially attributed victims.
Man, it's chilling to think that there might be other victims out there. Their stories just lost to time. It's that sense of the unknown, the possibility that we've only scratched the surface of this case. It's what keeps it so compelling, even after all these years.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder if we'll ever, truly know the full extent of the Zodiac's crimes with all these unsolved mysteries and questions. And speaking of unanswered questions, let's talk about those ciphers for a second. We know that, like, two have been solved, but what about the remaining two? Z13 and Z32. Are those still being investigated, or have they kind of just been relegated to the dustbin of history?
Oh, they're far from forgotten. I mean, those ciphers are like digital sirens,
Yeah.
luring, code breakers and these amateur sleuths into their depths. There are entire online communities that are dedicated to cracking those codes, fueled by the belief that they hold, the key to unlocking the Zodiac's identity or revealing some hidden truth about the case. So it's like a modern day treasure hunt. But the prize is like the solution to one of the most enduring mysteries of our time. It's incredible to think that those ciphers, created decades ago, still have the power to like capture our imaginations and drive this kind of like collaborative effort.
Yeah, it really speaks to, that allure of the unknown, that human desire to solve puzzles, to bring order to chaos. But it also highlights how the Zodiac case has just transcended the boundaries of like traditional crime investigation. It's become this cultural phenomenon, this story that we as a society are still trying to finish.
Right, and that brings us to this like really fascinating question. What if the Zodiac were still active today? How would his like game have evolved in the age of the internet, social media, all this advanced technology we have now? It's almost like a thought experiment, but it's really interesting to consider how he might have adapted to our modern world.
Yeah, it's a chilling thought, right? Imagine the Zodiac with his understanding of psychology and manipulation unleashed in the digital age. So instead of sending letters to newspapers, he could be, hacking into news websites, posting cryptic messages on social media, or even creating these elaborate online puzzles to taunt the authorities and the public.
Oh, wow. It's like he'd be like, "Bleh," weaponizing the very tools that we use to connect with each other, turning like our digital world into his own twisted playground. And instead of, handwriting analysis and fingerprint comparisons, investigators would be grappling with like anonymous servers, encrypted messages, that vast, often untraceable expanse of the internet.
Yeah, precisely. He could create multiple online personas, spread misinformation, manipulate public opinion, and all while remaining virtually invisible.
Yeah.
The challenge for law enforcement wouldn't just be solving the crimes. It would be like identifying the perpetrator in this sea of digital noise.
Right, right. It's like a whole new level of cat and mouse, but with technology kind of tilting the scales in favor of the criminal. But wouldn't there be ways to, like, track him down, follow, like, the digital breadcrumbs? I mean, even the most skilled hackers leave some kind of trace, right?
Well, while it's true that every digital interaction does leave some kind of footprint, the level of sophistication required to completely erase those traces
Yeah.
is certainly possible for someone like the Zodiac. I mean, think about it. He was creating complex ciphers back in the 60s and 70s, long before, personal computers, the internet. Who's to say that he wouldn't have embraced this digital world
Yeah.
and mastered all of its dark corners?
That's a terrifying thought, but it also makes you wonder if maybe he was tech savvy enough to disappear entirely back then. Maybe he found a way to go off the grid, create a new identity,
Yeah.
and live out his days without ever being caught.
Yeah, it's a possibility we can't completely discount. The Zodiac case is just riddled with unanswered questions, with theories that range from plausible to like totally outlandish.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason it continues to captivate us. It's a story without a definitive ending, a mystery that continues to challenge our understanding of human behavior and the limits of our ability to control chaos.
You've said it before, but it bears repeating. The Zodiac case is a reminder that despite all of our advancements, there are still mysteries that elude us, puzzles that resist our best efforts to solve them. And that's maybe the most unsettling aspect of it all, the knowledge that some secrets remain hidden, some stories unfinished.
Yeah, exactly. It's a case that forces us to confront,
Yeah.
the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary individuals,
Mm-hmm.
and just that enduring power of the unknown.
Well, I think we've done a pretty thorough job of exploring those dark corners today. We've covered the confirmed facts, the chilling communications, the suspects, those unsolved mysteries, and even, ventured into that hypothetical realm of what the Zodiac's game might look like in our modern world.
It's been a fascinating deep dive, exploring this complex and disturbing case with you.
Absolutely. And as always, a huge thank you to you, dear listener, for providing the material for this deep dive. I hope this exploration has, given you some new insights, sparked some thought-provoking questions, and maybe even fueled your own inner detective. The Zodiac case may remain unsolved, but its power to fascinate and intrigue us, it endures. Until next time, keep that curiosity burning bright. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to finally crack the code of the Zodiac Killer.